I am honestly exhausted by the constant victim mindset we see from MAGA every single day. These are the same people who point fingers at so-called liberal rhetoric for fueling political tension, while at their own rallies they spread some of the harshest and most divisive language imaginable. Donald Trump even shares extreme imagery online, while media figures like Jesse Waters casually talk about escalating conflict. And perhaps no one embodies this double standard more than Stephen Miller, a man who loudly attacks the so-called deep state, yet operates behind the scenes as if he were a shadow president. But just recently, Governor Gavin Newsom delivered a major blow to that behind-the-scenes influence, dealing what could be a serious setback for Miller and, by extension, Trump himself. Before we dive into the details of what happened, I want to highlight someone who called out this exact hypocrisy, our very own Adam Mockler, who has been breaking down how MAGA rhetoric fuels the same climate they claim to be victims of. And as always, if you're enjoying this channel, please remember to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us continue the work we do.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired of conservatives gaslighting about the current political environment and Donald Trump's rhetoric when all of this escalation can be traced back to his entrance into American politics. His claim to fame was saying that Obama wasn't born in America. He was the first presidential candidate to have his crowd chant, "Lock her up," about a political opponent. You can bring up the insurrection. Even in the past few weeks, my home city of Chicago, he posted a photo of Chicago being invaded by the Department of War. So the broader point here is Donald Trump endlessly deflects and tries to blame it on the other side when he is the one responsible for amping up the tension in America. And I've spent all of my formative years throughout high school, throughout college, looking to the president, who I'm supposed to be able to look up to, and seeing somebody who's trying to place blame on the left, who's amping up the rhetoric constantly. And yeah, it's not good.
So you think it's Donald Trump's fault that a deranged leftist climbed up to the top of a building and shot up the ICE facility, not once now, but twice in Texas?
I think it's Donald Trump's fault that America has gotten to this heated place. I think that
no responsibility for the radicalization on the left that's causing this violent outburst.
That 29-year-old is radicalized by online communities and online algorithms. I'm not going to blame that directly on Trump, but he was caught in a lot of online video game algorithms and all these communities. Donald Trump,
but it's Trump's
10
fault.
years ago, Donald Trump amped up the tension in America.
So he ran 10 years ago, and this guy then 10 years later, somehow you're connecting. Can't you just take responsibility for it?
Oh,
on the left.
But let's not do the he has to take responsibility because he's a Democrat.
I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You want me to take more responsibility than the president of the United States?
I want you to understand.
I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber.
I want you to understand that we are in the middle of an epidemic of left-wing violence. They're attacking ICE. They shot Charlie. It's happening all over the country. We have these Free Palestine people running around trying to burn down the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. On and on
then
and
maybe
on.
The president,
it's not Trump's fault
the president of the
that the left
States
is radicalized to the point of saying, we're done talking and we're going to start shooting.
Scott, the data indicates... Scott, is Trump amping down the tensions?
Amping down the tensions?
Yeah, is he taking the tensions down? Is he trying to do that?
I think he's mad that his friend got murdered, if you want that.
The job of the president is to tone down the rhetoric.
Yeah,
number one on the...
Adam is absolutely right here. And he's been doing a great job breaking down the weak and misleading arguments we constantly hear from MAGA voices on these panels. But what's striking is the complete lack of self-reflection from MAGA, or the right in general, when it comes to political violence, especially the kind that isn't just directed at politicians or public figures. Donald Trump engages in actions that have real-world consequences every single day. Whether it's reckless foreign policy decisions, funneling taxpayer money into harmful international conflicts, or tearing families apart with cruel enforcement tactics, these are all forms of political violence. And on that last issue in particular, Governor Gavin Newsom is pushing back harder than ever, making an announcement that left Stephen Miller completely unraveling. And we're going to break it all down.
Just a few weeks ago that we were standing up and pushing back as it relates to the rigging of elections. We were at the Democracy Center in Little Tokyo, the sacred site where we were interning and busing the Japanese. That shameful part of our past. And what did the administration do? What did Stephen Miller do? What did Donald Trump do? They sent masked men to intimidate folks from walking in to that event. Masked men. Poor soul that happened to be in the area, delivery guy delivering strawberries, was detained because he just happened to be in the area. Collateral damage. Disappeared. These masked men had no identification. These masked men did not provide any information, name, badge number. Hidden from accountability, any transparency, any oversight. That's Trump's America, but it is not the America we've grown up in.
I think I'm just going to get into the habit of regularly repeating this on the show, but the next Democratic president is certainly going to need to govern with a vengeance. These people have broken the law. They have broken our country. They have done so purposefully. They want people to feel a constant unrest and distrust. And the people who did this need to be shown and taught a lesson, because it's the only language that MAGA understands is strength and intimidation. And I think that we just need to make it clear that justice needs to be served. And at least Governor is trying to do that right now, but it's going to need to continue. We are going to need to take this fight as far as we possibly can, and making it very, very clear that you cannot break the law like this. You cannot operate an authoritarian regime, and as Newsom would term Stephen Miller, and make him freak out. You can't be a fascist. And he said all that, and it made Stephen Miller lose his little weird-shaped head in his mind. Gavin Newsom and Stephen Miller trade jabs over who is inciting violence and terrorism. California Governor Gavin Newsom clapped back at White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who accused him on Wednesday of inciting violence and terrorism. Miller, long known for his bombastic rhetoric, shared a clip of Newsom on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert this week and wrote, "This language incites violence and terrorism." During his interview with Stephen Colbert on Tuesday evening, Newsom slammed the Trump administration's illegal immigration crackdown. Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process, no oversight, zero accountability happening in the United States of America today, Newsom fumed, adding, "People ask, well, is authoritarianism you being hyperbolic? We're being hyperbolic," Newsom said. "If you're black and brown community, it's here in this country." Newsom hit back at Miller with a clip of his own, which he captioned, "This language incites violence and terrorism." In the clip, Miller says, "The Democrat Party does not fight for, care about, or represent American citizens. It is an entity devoted exclusively to the defense of hardened criminals, gangbangers, and illegal aliens." Governor Newsom's press office wrote on Twitter that Stephen Miller is a fascist. Miller responded, "Why do you think he posted this?" Newsom responded, "Because you're a fascist." This really comes back to the constant victim complex that runs throughout MAGA, especially when it comes to language. For example, you'll see a message from Governor Newsom's press office joking that certain officials are going to have a rough day. And shortly after, Newsom introduces new legislation aimed at protecting immigrant communities. Suddenly, those same officials claim they feel threatened or unsafe, even as they actively support policies that separate families across the country. Instead of focusing on luxury lifestyles and playing the victim, maybe they should take a moment to reflect on the very real harm their policies are causing. And then there's Stephen Miller, complaining, "Why is Newsom using this kind of language? It could put us at risk." Well, if that's really the standard, why is it acceptable for them to use the same heated rhetoric against people like James Comey? The double standard is obvious, and the hypocrisy couldn't be clearer.
What James Comey did is truly one of the most severe assaults on our freedoms and liberties that has occurred in the whole history of this nation, Sean.
There is an active investigation into James Comey right now, and it could very well lead to a trial in which Donald Trump ends up losing. For one of the most powerful figures in the country to declare James Comey is a hardened criminal, a terrible person, and we need to lock him up. That's exactly the kind of extreme language Stephen Miller pretends to be so concerned about. If he's worried about being called authoritarian, maybe he should reflect on the words he and his allies use, because their rhetoric carries enormous weight. The truth is, Stephen Miller's constant outrage is exhausting. His voice, his style, and the way he inserts himself into every debate reveal more about his own insecurities than any real vision for the country. At the end of the day, their politics seem driven less by solutions and more by cruelty, by the desire to control and to waste people's time rather than offer anything constructive. That's the real contrast here. On one side, there are calls for accountability, reform, and a just response to years of corruption. On the other, there's endless grievance, lawsuits meant for show, and a refusal to take responsibility. This is why many believe figures like Miller, Christine Owen, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Kash Patel, and others should face real accountability for their actions. Even Supreme Court justices who have been accused of taking questionable gifts are not above scrutiny, which is why discussions about reforming and even expanding the court have become so urgent. Because in the end, this is not about petty grievances, it's about protecting democracy and standing up against cruelty for its own sake. Just listen to former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who has seen firsthand how destructive that culture of cruelty can be.
How much of this prosecution of James Comey do you think is about actually seeking a conviction? How much is simply to inconvenience him, sending a message, force him to spend time and money on attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'd love to get a conviction, but this is all about the inconvenience. This is all about intimidation. You know, the message, you think about how Donald Trump has operated his whole life. I mean, I like to remind people the Republican Party used to be the party that campaigned against frivolous lawsuits. And now the president, you know, basically is a practitioner of frivolous lawsuits and lawfare. And that's exactly what it is. So he knows that James Comey is going to have to spend money. He's going to be inconvenienced. It's damage to the reputation potentially. And that's all that matters. And it's a message he is sending to anybody else that this could happen to you too. So what ends up happening? People go quiet. You see, you know, corporations that go quiet or salute and get along. And so it's, I guess, look, it's successful, but in the long run, I think it's going to be very much a stain on our history when we look back at how this was done.
You served on the January 6th committee, obviously. How do you prepare for the possibility the president could target you, others for prosecution?
Yeah, I have absolutely no worry about it because, first off, what I did was my constitutional duty, and I would argue that I embarrassed him because we showed that he was complicit or launching the overthrow of the government, the attempted overthrow. But any retribution would just be based on he was embarrassed, he feels bad, and he wants to. But there's literally nothing he can do. And if he makes the decision to do that, and they make up some charges, it'll just make me even more effective at pushing back against him. So I'm not worried about it in the least. The thing that people need to understand is when you back down, he wins. Secondarily, when you stand up and confront him, he tends to back down. And standing up is contagious. We need to do that. You see, like what happened with Jimmy Kimmel when there was a major pushback against what the president said and done. It's successful and it builds momentum.
At the end of the day, it's clear they're just trying to disrupt people's lives for the sake of it. They know there's no real case to be made. If they truly believe they had proof of the so-called biggest fraud in history, then where are the convictions from 2020? If that election was really stolen, why aren't they prosecuting Joe Biden, VP Harris, or Nancy Pelosi? The answer is simple. They have nothing. This is all about creating chaos, stirring anger, and making lives harder, not about justice. That's why we're going to keep calling it out, and we're going to keep fighting back. If you believe in that too, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a like on this video. And if you made it this far, drop a blue heart in the comments. Thank you all so much for your support. And until next time, I will see you soon.